You may have heard the term volatility about slot machines, but what exactly is it? How do we know? How can it affect your gameplay, and why does it matter? We're covering all of that and more in today's episode. Welcome back, everybody, to the Cowboy Slot channel, where we bring you experienced advice from years of working in the casinos, tips, reviews, and so much more. Be sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit that bell to stay notified for when the next video comes out. Also, be sure to share this video on your social media to help out others. It's always free. So today we're talking all about volatility, and honestly, it is the biggest deciding factor that you, the player, should be using, not just for when you're picking a slot machine, but when you're planning your entire casino visit. Now, we've done several overviews about volatility in the past, but today we're devoting an entire full episode so that we can really dig deep into all the aspects of what volatility is and what it means for you. So let's get started with what is volatility. The first thing before we continue that is really important for you to understand is that volatility is not a setting, nor is it anything that the casino can control. Think of it like this. If a slot machine was a person, the volatility would be the DNA. All of the settings and odds and everything else would just simply be the clothes on the person. The clothes can be changed, but the DNA cannot. In the most basic of terms, volatility is how the game is designed to play out. So now that you know what volatility is, how do we know? Every single slot game that gets designed comes with a volatility index, and this is information that is printed on the par sheet. It's a mathematical scale, almost like a grade of sorts, of how a machine is supposed to play out in the long term. The volatility index is clearly labeled on all par sheets for all slot games. Before a casino decides to purchase a slot machine, they do a full review of the par sheet so that they can see exactly how the game is going to play out over the entire term that it's on their floor. This is how we know exactly what the volatility of each game is, because it's clearly printed on the par sheets. In some cases, you, the player, can even look up the volatility rating of certain slot machines through manufacturers' websites. When it comes to the par sheets, though, unfortunately, it is proprietary information, meaning those par sheets are only shared between the manufacturer and casino management. What this means is, unfortunately, you, the player, cannot look at the exact par sheets and the exact data for each slot game. Unless, of course, you work in the industry. There are, however, some publicly available par sheets that are available on the internet if you want to look up and see volatility indexes of previous games that existed. These can be found online, and reviewing these older par sheets can give you a good idea and a good example of what actually goes into a par sheet and what goes into a slot machine. So now that you know what volatility is and where it comes from and how we know, let's talk briefly about how you, the player, should be using volatility and why you should be using volatility when you're picking a slot machine or planning out your casino visit. After this, I'll give you some educational tips and pointers on how you, the player, can help identify what the volatility range of any slot game is just by looking at it. So why should you, the player, care about volatility, and why should you be using it when you pick a slot machine? Well, the biggest dead giveaway is that the volatility index is used by the casinos to make their decision on what machines to purchase. If it's important for them, then it's really important for you. The volatility index tells the casino exactly how the machine is supposed to play out and end up in its favor in the long term. The second biggest reason that you should care as a player is because, just like the DNA of a person, each person has different DNA. Each slot game has different volatility, meaning that you could have two slot machines, both at the same denomination, both at the same bet amount, and both with the exact same payback percentage. But the volatility is different, and remember, it means that that machine is going to play out differently overall. So identifying this is going to give you the strongest advantage when picking a slot machine and planning out your casino visit. The third major thing about volatility and why you should be using it is the fact that, unlike payback percentage or any other kind of settings, volatility is consistent and doesn't change no matter where in the world you are or what casino you're in. So if you, the player, focus on volatility, it doesn't matter what the other settings of the machine are. Focus on volatility and it will give you an advantage. I do want to quickly add that we are talking about slot machines here, and there are a lot of other devices out there that look and feel and act like slot machines, but they are not slot machines. Tap the card in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. We're also going to put a link to it in the video description down below. We did an entire live stream on what exactly is a slot machine. I mention this, of course, because I know we're going to get questions about things like bingo terminals, HHR, or lottery terminals. Understand that those are not legally considered slot machines, and while they do have volatility, it's treated entirely different. Moving on to our next part, and before we dive deep into this topic, there's three major things that I want you to keep in mind. The first thing is that you, the player, can identify the volatility of a slot machine when you sit down at a game. While we would absolutely love to give you the volatility rating of every single slot machine, just understand that you, the player, can make that own determination if you know exactly what to watch for, and we're going to go over that in this episode. So just remember that you, the player, can crack this. You just have to know all of the factors to consider when you look at a slot machine. The second thing is that this is a learning process. This is a lot of information, and volatility can get extremely complicated. There's a lot of factors that go into it. So don't worry, you're not going to get it right on the first try. But as with everything, with enough practice, you'll become a pro. For this upcoming part, when we start going over the factors of what to watch for, I'd really recommend getting a pen and paper or taking some notes on your phone so that you can write these down and have them with you when you go to the casino. The third biggest thing to remember is that slot machines at the end of the day are still slot machines. They are still random devices, so even if you do pick the best machine or the lowest volatile machine and you utilize every single strategy correctly, it's still going to be a random result. All you're doing is increasing your chances. So just understand that because you implement all of these, it does not mean that you are going to hit the top line every single time. Use this as a tool on your next casino visits, but always remember to play responsibly and budget accordingly. So what's the difference between a low volatile game and a high volatile game? Volatility, after all, is a scale from low to high. What this means is the higher that you go in the volatility scale, the harder it's going to be to hit on and the more dead spins it's going to have. However, there's some positive trade-offs. Even though these higher volatile games can have longer periods of dead spins and can be harder to hit something big, understand that it's high risk and high reward. So the positive is if you do hit something on a high volatile game, the reward is going to be a lot better than a low volatile game. High volatility is high risk, high reward. So what about the lower that you go on the scale? Low volatile games, what exactly does that mean? So with a low volatile game, it means that it's more consistent and steady and has a higher hit frequency on a regular basis. This also means that it has the chance to hit its top line more frequently. Starting out on a lower volatile game is going to give players the chance to build up their bankroll and to be able to play those higher volatile games once they get a little more built up. Now, here's the downside to those low volatile games because they do have some drawbacks. The lower volatile games tend to be very simple, very boring, not as flashy, and typically not as fun. So let's compare these two with a brief cartoon about a high volatile game and a low volatile game, at the end of which you'll be able to decide which game would you prefer to play.
Say you have two slot machines, a high volatile game and a low volatile game. Now, volatility isn't a setting or anything the casino can control, it's how the game was designed at the factory. We put these two in a race to the end goal. But it's a long race, the course of the machine's life. So there's no way to really tell where the machine is in this race at any given point. And they're off. They will both eventually reach the same finish line, however they have different styles to get there. The low volatile game basically power walks it, giving a consistent gameplay that you can count on. A win here, a win there, and a much greater chance of hitting its top line more frequently. Whereas the high volatile game is full of energy, and will do quick sprints with moments of pausing for a break during the race. You may have longer periods of dead spins that can last a long time, but you also have a chance to hit it big. The drawback with these games is you don't know when that is, and it can be a lot harder to catch. Which one would you pick?
All right, so let's go over exactly what to watch for and how to tell the volatility index of a game. Remember for this part to grab a pen and paper or take some notes on your phone. It does get very complicated. And like I said, it's nothing that you're going to be able to pick up on right away. So it's a learning curve. You're going to have to practice. You're going to have to learn what to watch for. But these are the biggest things that you need to watch for. Number one, the game rules say a lot. So typically speaking, with a higher volatile game, the game rules are going to be long and complicated. You should always be reading these game rules, guys. There's so much information and detail in them that you, the player, need to learn and understand before you put your money into a slot machine. Low volatile games typically don't have very complicated or lengthy game rules. So just by hitting that game rules button and briefly scrolling through, if it's pages and pages and pages long with tons of symbols and tons of options and tons of words, chances are it's higher in volatility. Number two, if it seems simple and boring, chances are it's lower in volatility. Very rarely will low volatile games have a lot of extra features, symbols, or bonus rounds. But, and this is where it gets tricky, be careful because some games can be a little deceiving. It can look very simple and straightforward, but it can be higher in volatility. Some games can be very simple in appearance but have hidden features that add to the volatility, such as if any symbol on the line pays anything, or if there are a lot of different symbols that say double, or if the multiplier is really high. So a game can appear very simple, but these are again factors that you, the player, need to consider when you're trying to determine the volatility of a game. Any added feature, and it doesn't even have to be a bonus round, can add to the volatility. These can be things like if any symbol on the line pays, or if a lot of symbols have the word double or triple written on top of them. Things like that will add to the volatility. The third major thing, the more the RNG has to choose from, the higher the volatility is going to be. Most casinos today have majority of their floor as medium to high volatile games. So the chances are you're going to have to really look for those low volatile games if you're out to play those. So many games out there have a lot of flashy features, long reels, multiple symbols, different types of bonuses, all of this. Those are more options that the RNG has to choose from. If the RNG has a lot of different things to pick from, it's going to be higher in volatility. Number four, watch out for those higher multipliers or games that have a lot of different multipliers. It's perfectly normal for a slot machine to have a doubler or a tripler symbol. However, anything beyond that is adding to the volatility factor. Games like these are going to have a lot more dead spins and are going to be a lot harder to hit that top line. Number five, the pay table is your golden key. Always look at your pay tables, and if you're looking at a game with the same denomination and same bet amount, compare the top line on both of those games. The higher the reward is, the harder it's going to be to hit on, and that can be an indication that that game is higher in volatility. Here is a perfect example. Say that you have two games. Both of them, for this example, we're going to say have the exact same bet amount and the exact same payback percentage. Now, look at the pay tables and compare the two. You'll notice that this one has a much higher top line award, but look at those multipliers. This is an indication that this slot machine is going to have a lot more dead spins and is not going to pay out that top line very frequently. So you have a lower chance of hitting something on it. But if it does hit, it's going to hit big. Again, high risk, high reward for high volatility. This other one is clearly the lower volatile option. You can see that that top line is not as high as the other game, but it has a chance to hit that top line more frequently. So while the reward on this one is not going to be as high as this one over here, you're going to have the better chance of hitting something on this game. So always remember to read your pay tables. Now, if you're looking to play a game with a progressive on it, progressives can get a little tricky because it all depends on what type of progressive it is. Tap the card in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. We're also going to put a link to it in the video description down below that's going to help you identify what kind of progressive that you're playing. The reason that I mentioned about progressives is because if you're looking at a pay table that has a progressive on it, you might actually want to take this roll and reverse it depending on what type of progressive that you're playing. Earlier, I said this would get complicated, didn't I? There are tons of factors when it comes to the machine's volatility, and it can get very confusing. But again, not to worry, because after enough practice of knowing what to look for, you'll be able to get this like a pro. Number 6, let's talk about pay lines. Some games like Dancing Drums have no pay lines at all. And this is a dead giveaway indication that the virtual reel strips on that particular game are incredibly long and complicated, making it, of course, high volatility. If you're looking at a slot machine that has defined pay lines, this is kind of where it gets tricky, because the less pay lines it has, the more that it's going to pay out for each individual line hit. But again, this is where it gets kind of confusing. When dealing with games that have multiple pay lines, this rule is almost reversed in a way. I'll give you a quick example. Let's say that you have two triple stars machines. One triple star machine has a single pay line, and the other triple stars machine has 5 pay lines. The single pay line version might pay 15 credits for a mixed combo of 7s on the pay line, whereas the triple stars with 5 lines might only pay 5 credits on a pay line for any 7. This is where reading and comparing your pay tables on slot machines is crucial. So if we were to compare all 3 of those machines that we just talked about, the triple stars single line, the triple stars 5 line, and the dancing drums, let's put them in order of volatility from lowest to highest. The lowest volatile option of these 3 would actually be the 5 line triple stars. Next up from that would be the single line triple stars, and the highest volatile would be the dancing drums. So you can see now why pay lines can get a little tricky. Number 7, bonus rounds can tell you a lot about a game's volatility. There are so many slot machines with bonus rounds out there today, so how can you tell volatility just by looking at what kind of bonus it has? If a game has more than one bonus or multiple different features or ways to achieve the bonus, that is going to add to the volatility factor. A good example of this is if a game has a hold and spin feature, plus it also has free spins or free spins that re-trigger or something like that. Anything where the bonus has extras added on top of it or multiple different types of bonuses, this is going to add to the volatility. This is also where if a game has added extra features, like for example, the little devil that runs across the screen or something that randomly triggers, that again adds to the volatility factor. So what about those bonus games where players can actually choose the type of bonus that they want? We're going to use dancing drums as an example for this one, because if you get the free spins on dancing drums, you, the player, get to decide what kind of bonus do you want. Do you want less free spins that pay more or more free spins that pay less? What this is essentially doing is placing you, the player, in the driver's seat to decide what kind of volatility you want to play on your bonus round. The less free spins is going to be a riskier bet, but have a higher reward. So that's going to be a higher volatile option. Whereas if you want more free spins, but pays less, that's going to be a lower volatile option. So we've talked a lot about volatility today, and I'm sure that you have a lot of questions. But just understand this when you're trying to decipher what a game's volatility is. Always evaluate your game. Evaluate all of the factors. Look at the game rules. Really look at the pay table. Any feature, anything added, even on those older school machines. On those older school machines, if any symbol drops on the line, if it pays, that's going to be a higher volatile feature. Any feature, anything is going to add to the volatility and change it up. Also understand this, that high volatile games are not necessarily bad. Some players genuinely like the thrill of the higher volatility because it is higher risk and high reward. So it really all depends on how you, the player, want to play. This should be something that you evaluate when you go into the casino. What kind of a casino trip do you want to make it? If you're working with a lower or a limited budget, or you really just want something that's more consistent, then stick with the lower volatile games. Also, we always recommend to start at those lower volatile games and build up your bankroll and work your way up, and then venture off to a game that's higher in volatility. At the end of the day, it all comes down to how you, the player, want to play your game. But always consider a game's volatility before you play. And always make sure that you budget accordingly and play responsibly. Thanks so much for watching. Check out these other videos and be sure to subscribe to the channel for more slot tips. It's always free. Visit ropethejackpot.com for free guides and a whole lot more. Catch you on the next episode.